that's on the webinar today. It is being recorded, so I better watch everything I say. Everyone is coming in kind of a muted mode, and if you have any questions, please ask them in the chat window. We will be monitoring that, and we'll respond to those most likely towards the end of the webinar. And then, again, if you have any other questions after this, feel free to contact me or Betsy or anyone at Martin & Associates, and we can help you. And also, for all of you that signed up, you will receive an email with links to the webinar recording, which I'm sure you're excited to view possibly again, the PowerPoint slide deck, and our year-end close document that I will probably show and also make reference to, and those things will be on our website if they are not already. All right, so we will go ahead and get started. Once again, thanks for joining, everybody. My name is Chris Isbell. I've been at Martin & Associates for 12.5 years, and I'm kind of lead the Dynamics GP practice along with some great coworkers. And we will be discussing the Dynamics GP year-end close process for 2019. And again, if you have any questions, knock those out in the chat window. All righty. So the agenda for today. So everything's all about the GP year-end. So we'll talk about when to run it, you know, what downloads and updates need to happen. Generally speaking, you know, the GP year-end is a service pack for GP that is available for currently supported versions of GP. We'll get into that in a little bit. Any file maintenance you might want to run, kind of the order of operations of running the year-end close process, depending upon what modules you use, and then a little bit about payroll year-end, and that's especially interesting this year with all the new updates to the W-4 form and how that's kind of changed a little bit. In the slide deck, we have links to some important and helpful, you know, Microsoft pages that cover all the year-end documents and processes and information, all that kind of stuff, as well as you'll kind of see me flip back and forth a little bit between GP if there's, you know, some relevant things to show you. And at the end, we'll do any questions and answers. Hopefully questions. All righty. So, all right, quick overview. We are going to have our year-end close document at this link, and there are a bunch of links in this Dynamics community article that kind of covers all the good information about the year-end. And let's kind of jump right in here. All right, so for those of you who use payroll, you do have to do the year-end payroll, obviously every year. That, like I said earlier, that's normally a service pack, and that is put out for supported versions of GP, which currently means Dynamics GP 2015, 2016, and 2018. So if you're on any of those 3 versions of GP, there will be a payroll year-end update that adds, you know, any new features that need to be eligible for 2020, as well as updated tax tables and any other new government rules and regulations that have happened. So again, that's GP 2015, 2016, and 2018 are eligible for the payroll year-end update. If you're on an older version than that, you would either need to manually update your tax tables or upgrade GP to a supported version. Alrighty. So besides payroll, kind of the order of operations, if you're getting ready to close the year, would be inventory first. You're going to close the fiscal year. Second and third would be receivables and payables. And for those, depending upon if you have a fiscal year or a calendar year, you can do one or both, whichever is relevant. You know, at the end of December, you'd be closing the calendar year, but if you're if your fiscal year is the same as the calendar year, you can close both. Same for both of those. I'll get into the funny uniquities about the AR and AP side as well, but for fixed assets, you need to close the fiscal year. That kind of determines, you know, if you add a new asset, what fiscal year that's going to be a part of. Kind of got to roll that forward. If you use GP's analytical accounting, you'll close the fiscal year there. And then the last thing you do is close the GL year. And we'll get into the, you know, all the kind of individual steps of each of those modules. But those are the ones that, depending upon, you know, what modules you use, how you would do that. GL is always last. Payroll is kind of its own. All right, so let's jump into inventory. Again, we're going to kind of jump through these steps on a slide deck information. You might see me jump back between here and GP, and lots of more detailed steps and recommendations are in our year-end close document, as well as, you know, any Microsoft year-end closing links and information that's, you know, on Microsoft's website about that, which we have links for those. All right, so in inventory, on all these slides, you'll see, hey, make a backup, make a backup, make a backup. You don't have to make a backup before and after every module close. I would absolutely make a backup before you start this process, and then make a backup after you're done with the process, just in case anything weird happens, which rarely happens, but just in case anything weird happens, yeah, make a backup before you start the process, close all the modules, and then make a backup at the end, because you never know. All right, so for inventory, first thing we're going to do is make sure all of the transactions for the year have been posted. So if you have any inventory batches out there, you'll want to post those, make sure all your transactions are done. And then it's recommended to do an inventory reconcile. That just kind of, you know, verifies that all the information in the tables is correct, quantities, values, that kind of stuff. And then you would do, ideally, a year-end inventory count, or, you know, if you do cycle counting regularly, you know, you don't necessarily have to do a complete physical inventory at the end of the year, but it is recommended just to make sure that you have the correct counts, correct valuation, and run through that process. There are some reports you can print, such as a stock status report. I would definitely print one of those as of 12/31, because the stock status report's not really like a date. Well, I mean, it's date sensitive in the fact that if you run as of 12/31, you're going to get information as of 12/31. But if you run it on, you know, January 5th or something like that, that's going to include any data that might have happened between 12/31 and January 5th. So definitely run a report as of 12/31 or, before you do any transactions in 2020. And then close the year. So in GP, every module, let me go back there, has a link. So if we're looking at inventory, hopefully you see my GP window. If we're looking at inventory, under routines, every module has a year-end close. So if you run this after you've run all your other reports, after you've done your counts, verified your quantities, all that fun stuff. You will just hit process. You can optionally hit any of these check boxes should they apply. So if you wanted to remove any old discontinued items, these would be items that are physically marked as discontinued. So if I was looking at an item card, there's an item type here of discontinued. So if you had any inventory that was discontinued, mark him. And if you selected that checkbox on the year-end close, that would remove any discontinued items. Same thing for sold line attributes, sold receipts. And optionally, if you're using standard costing for your inventory, you might want to update your items standard cost. Alrighty. So that's the inventory year-end close in a quick nutshell. Again, all the more detailed items are in our year-end close document and any related web links. Okay. Optionally, you can close the fiscal periods for the inventory series, just to make sure people don't accidentally post anything in 2019 when everything should be posted in 2020. And that's done through the fiscal period setup window in GP, which would be under Tools, Setup, Company, Fiscal Periods. You'll notice that there's a column for every series, so financial, sales, purchasing, inventory. If these are marked as closed, then people will not be able to enter transactions in those periods. All righty, so let's go back. All right, so that's inventory. Any questions? Hopefully, if there are, put them in the chat window and we will respond to those. All right, so after you've done inventory, you are ready to move on to receivables and payables. And we'll cover receivables first. So, receivables and payables are a little bit interesting. So, whereas in inventory and fixed assets and GL, it is highly recommended. In fixed assets and GL, you almost have to close the year. For AR and AP, if you choose not to close the year, there's really no effect whether you close it or not. But if you close it, some smart list object dollar amounts like amount since last closed, average days to pay, this year, last year, total number of invoices this year, last year, things like that. Some of those amounts are updated when you actually click the button to close the year. So if you rely on some of those numbers in SmartList, and I will show you that. Good question. Lisa, I got your question. I will respond to that towards the end of the webinar, if that's okay. But good question. So we'll keep talking about receivables real quick. So whenever you close the year, and we will jump back into GP here, and we'll go to sales and routines. We'll see a year-end close under routines. And you can choose to close, you know, basically all equals both fiscal year and calendar year if your fiscal year is a calendar year. Or you could optionally just close the calendar year at the December 31st. But when you do this, there are basically some summary bucket amounts that get updated whenever you click this button. So if it's, you know, if you come into receivables and it's January 15th or something like that, and you decide, oh, all right, I'm going to close the year, and you say, all right, you know, run this process, it's going to include anything that has been done in GP all the way up until January 15th, and it will include those amounts, you know, invoices, dollar amounts, things like that, in some of these summary bucket numbers, and that is in a smart list. So let me just show you. So sales, customers, I made one called year end. So a bunch of items like this, and there's in our document, they're all listed out. So average days to pay for the year, invoices, life to date, last year, year to date. These buckets only get updated whenever you click that year-end close button in receivables. And that's basically all that button does. It doesn't lock people from entering transactions for that year. It doesn't kind of close out the module, anything like that. All it really does when you run that the year-end close for receivables and payables is update some summary numbers like this. So running the year-end close is optional, but if you rely on these, if you are a heavy user of SmartList and you rely on some of these summary numbers, total amount invoiced this year, all that kind of stuff, then you will want to run the year-end close for receivables and payables, you know, January 1st or, you know, 12/31 or something like that. Once you have all the documents in for the receivables or payables module for 2019, you will want to run the year-end close for those modules if you use those kind of summary numbers. Alrighty, so let's jump into payables. Payables is very similar, except with AP, you have all kinds of 1099 information that you need to keep track of. All right, so when you're closing AP, it is recommended to, again, post all your transactions, print an aged trial balance as of 12/31, you know, optionally print a vendor period analysis report. That's pretty helpful. And then you need to make sure all your 1099 information is correct. So that's probably the most interesting piece of payables. So definitely, you know, make sure your vendors are marked appropriately as 1099 eligible, and that's on the vendor card. I'll show that in just a sec. And then also, you know, if you need to edit any information for a 1099 vendor, that's possible. You know, maybe earlier in the year they were marked incorrectly, either as 1099 or not 1099, and so the information is incorrect. You can edit that information if you need to. I'll show you that as well. You can print your 1099s as many times as you need to make sure they're all correct. And I'll show you that as well. And then you can close AP. Did have a quick question that I will respond to. Sorry, Lisa. I'll get your inventory one at the end, I promise. The question was, if we've never closed AP or AR, can we close 2019 or do we have to close any prior years? So no, you do not need to close any prior years for AR and AP. When you go to close it, it'll just know that you closed it as of 2019, and the summary numbers will be updated. For you, they're going to look pretty interesting. Like the total number of invoices, you know, for last year, if you've never closed AR and you closed this year, that number will be a big number because it's never been closed before, and it'll put last year, you know, put potentially, you know, 7 years worth of invoices in the bucket called last year. But every report that you run out of AR is pretty date sensitive anyway. So if you wanted to run, oh, what were my sales this year? You can just enter in 1/19 to 12/31/19 and see everything that happened for that year. So hopefully that answered your question. That was a good one. Thank you. All right. So moving back to AP real quick. 1099 information. So that's the biggest thing, making sure your 1099s are correct. So let me jump over to GP. And we'll go to the purchasing area. Okay, so under routines, besides the year-end close for payables, there's your print 1099 information. Again, you can run this as many times as you need to, and I would recommend that, you know, make sure the form's correct. Sometimes, you know, whether things happen or not, you know, the government might make a slight change to the 1099 form, you know, something might need to move up or down in the report or something like that. So that can all be tweaked. But let's say we'll just do continuous. We'll pick a year. Now, what do you want to print? The 1099 form, the alignment form, the 1096, any of those are fine. So we'll just hit print. I'll do it to the screen. And again, it's going to print any, I have nothing 1099, but it'll just print it to the screen, look at it. You know, nothing's getting set in stone. This is not anything, you know, that you have to send. It's just a good way to run a 1099, see who printed out, you know, make sure the form looks pretty good as far as alignment and all those kind of things. Make sure your information's correct for your 1099 form, all that fun stuff. So let's say you need to review what's gone on for your 1099 vendors. There's an inquiry here under purchasing vendor 1099 details. So any vendors that are 1099 eligible will show up in here, and it will display their tax type. And now let's say I'm looking at a month view, or you can look at a whole year view. But you know, just looking at March, April, May, pick your vendor, your year. You can scroll through the months and make sure everything's correct. It's a good way to just kind of verify the information. If you need to make a change and you say, oh man, you know, I know that vendor should have had, you know, some extra dollars in it. Under cards, 1099 details, again, it'll show you 1099 eligible vendors. And if you are displaying month, you can scroll through and say, oh, you know, in February, I know he should have had, you know, $150 in my correct 1099 box. And I will save that. And then, you know, we'll say March. He should have another, you know, $650 for whatever reason he was marked incorrectly. You can only edit these amounts when you are doing a display month. If I pick Beaumont again and change it to year, I'm trying to click in here, but it won't let me. So you have to be in month mode and pick any month, where that invoice was paid, and then you can enter the correct information. All right. Any questions on 1099s real quick before I move along? I'm just checking the chat window. All right. Nothing so far unless people are typing. All right. Let's move on to that's also payables. Also payables. What is the, I have a question. What is the update 1099 information utility? So let's jump into there real quick. So that was under utilities, update 1099 information. That is a way to take existing transactions that have been marked as 1099 and update things. So let's say we're going to update a vendor, and let's just pick Beaumont here because they're a vendor. So we'd add that vendor restriction into here if we're updating it by vendor. And we'll say, take anything and move him from, let's say it was incorrectly marked as an interest or even miscellaneous, and it was in the box 1099, box 10. We want to put that into miscellaneous box 7. So it's a way to take transactions that were marked as 1099 already and just update them correctly, kind of moving one between types and putting them in the correct box number. It does not take transactions that were, well, let's say you had a vendor that was not marked 1099 for half the year, and then you realize that they should have been 1099. So then, let's say from July on, you marked them as 1099. So anything July on would be fine, but those invoices that you might have done in the first half of the year when they were incorrectly marked as a 1099 vendor, or not as a 1099 vendor, you would need to fix those, and you could do it either manually, just jumping into cards 1099 details and pulling up that vendor like I did with Beaumont, and just saying, oh, in March I paid him X dollars and this was the amount, and I can fill that in manually. Or if you have the professional services tools installed, and I do not know if I have them installed on this demo here. It doesn't look like it. In the professional services tools, oh, there they are. There is a utility to kind of reconcile the 1099 information, which would accomplish that scenario where a vendor was incorrectly marked or not marked 1099, and you need to basically recalculate their 1099 amount. You would want to run this, you would want to run under purchasing, you'd want to run the 1099 modifier tool to kind of revalidate that. Excellent question. All righty. Okay, so we have done inventory, receivables, payables. Now we'll do fixed assets. So in fixed assets, you need to either close payables or at least, run any year-end closing procedures you want for payables. Make sure all your vendor transactions are in and posted and all that fun stuff. you will want to enter all of your fixed asset transactions for the current fiscal year, meaning if you need to, dispose of anything, retire any assets, go ahead. If you need to run, December's depreciation, do that before the end of the year so you can depreciate the last month. So once you've done those things, run your GL posting, which will take your fixed asset transactions and write them to the GL. Run any year-end reports that you want. It could be an asset valuation report, depreciation, life to date, and all those fun kind of things. It never hurts to go in when you're dealing with fixed assets to make sure your calendar is built correctly, which it should be anyways, but in the off chance that you limited your fixed asset calendar to end in 2019, you're going to have to adjust that so you can have a 2020 fiscal year, calendar year. Make sure your quarters are set up correctly, which should be done from the beginning. And then do your fixed asset year-end closing routine. So if you're living in GP, we'll jump to financial. So under setup, under fixed assets, there's a link for your calendar. If I just pull up my default calendar, normally when that's built, it goes to year 2199 or something like that. Looks like this one's out to 2219, so it accounts for a lot of years. So you just have to make sure your calendar has all those years defined, and normally it does. Same thing for your quarters. If you want to verify that, all right, here's my next year, my quarters are set up correctly, that should all already be done, but it never hurts to verify it. So again, under fixed asset routines, there's a year end, and pick any and potentially all books and run through that. So what that will do is that will mark the current fiscal year, book as complete, and know that when it goes to run depreciation next time, all the books and get updated to the next current fiscal year. If you're looking at a book setup, this number will move to the next year. So instead of 2019, it'll say 2020. And you have to do that before you can do any fixed asset transactions in the new year. And the year-end process for fixed assets will do that. So that says, all right, 2019 is done. 2020 is my new current fiscal year. Everything I do going forward is in 2020. So again, that is all the fixed asset fun. All right. Any questions on fixed assets before we move on to payroll? All righty. I'll watch for one, but we will move right along. Okay, for those of you who do not do payroll in GP, you can perhaps successfully zone out for a minute, grab a cup of coffee or a candy bar or something. But for those of you that do run payroll in GP, you guys have probably been following, all the, I'll just say drama, but information about the new W-4 form, or the new, W-4 form, and how that's kind of changed a little bit. So there is a very good article out there by Terry Healy from Microsoft. Let's see if I can pull it up. Okay, and I've included this this link as well I think it's in the slide deck, and it'll be in our year-end close document as well. But great, wonderful information from Terry Healy at Microsoft about the new W-4 form and how things will be handled in GP to account for some of those changes. So, you know, kind of she walks through a way to step through it, what things mean, screenshots, all that kind of fun stuff. Keep in mind, you know, only new employees that are starting in 2020 have to fill out this new W-4. Any employees that you might have in the system now, everything they have set up will just kind of maintain in, you know, going forward in 2020, unless they want to fill out a new W-4. So key item here, existing employees are not required to fill out a new W-4, only if your company wants them to. So that's kind of a fun piece of information there. One of the big changes was how dependents are calculated. So before you used to just enter a number. Oh, you know, I've got, you know, 4 dependents, 3 dependents, whatever. Now it's, you know, basically take your number of dependents and multiply it by a value based on, you know, income ranges and things like that. That's one of the bigger changes. Alrighty, so again, definitely check out this very wonderful Microsoft GP W-4 article that covers a lot of changes. All right, moving back to kind of the checklist. There's basically 2 ways to handle installing the payroll year-end update, and that just depends on if you need to run a 2020 payroll before you install the year-end update, or you can install the year-end update and then run all your 2020 transactions after that. We have both pieces covered in the slide deck and as well as in the year-end closing document that we have. Alrighty, so for payroll, make sure you have the latest 2019 payroll tax update installed. And again, you can do those, you can download that file from Microsoft's website directly, or in GP, you can go to the main menu, maintenance, US payroll updates, and check for tax updates and select to do that automatically. If you have the file, you'll just hit manual and then point it to where you've saved the file. And that will install the correct versions of your tax tables. Alrighty. So ideally, you will complete all your pay runs for the 2019 year, whether that's, you know, let's say it's December 23rd, and you're, you know, covering all your payroll through the end of the year. That's fine and dandy. You know, your payroll might be dated 12/31 or 12/23 or something, but you're not going to do another one until the next year. So that is all well and good. So complete all your pay runs for 2019. Do any other month-end, period-end, quarter-end procedures for 2019 that you might run. So it could be reporting, printing reports, things like that. Make a backup, install the 2019 year-end update. So when you do this, I did not want that. When you install the year-end update, that is going to update your Dynamics GP system as a whole. It is a service pack, and it is, you need to install that first and update your Dynamics system database, and then it will update every company that you have in your system, and, you know, essentially upgrade your Dynamics GP to the latest version of whatever GP version you're on. So if you're on, again, 2015, 2016, or 2018, all of those are eligible for the payroll year-end update, and that will put a service pack on there. So you'll need to do that once to update all the system and company databases, and then you need to install that on every client machine as well so that the versions match. You only run through all the table updates once, but you have to do the update on every GP client machine to account for that. And again, that's only if you're running the payroll year-end update, or if you feel like upgrading GP. If you're currently on GP 2018, not the latest version that came out in October, but just 2018, and you install the year-end update, it will upgrade your GP to the version now known as 2018.2. So it is essentially an upgrade for that if you're on the 2018 version. If you're on 15 or 16, it's a small upgrade, just a service pack upgrade, versus the 2018 one kind of takes you to the latest and greatest version. Okay, so after you've installed the year-end update and essentially upgraded your GP, you will create your payroll year-end file, and then verify, your W-2 and 1099-R information. Print your W-2s if you want, and make sure those are correct. Print your W-3, any 1099-R and 1096 forms. If you need the e-file, you can create your W-2 electronic file and send that off to whoever needs to get it, like SSA.gov or something like that. And optionally, you can archive any inactive employee HR information if you're using HR along with payroll. Make sure you've got 2020 fiscal period set up, and then last but not least, install the tax update for 2020 with all the new tax table information. And the reason you do that one last is you want to make sure your tax tables are correct for 2019 to do your last 2019 payroll, and then do your 2020 tax table update. So when you do 2020 payroll, you've got everything in there correctly. So that's the checklist if you're going to complete all your pay run for the end of the year. If you need to process a 2020 pay run before you complete your 2019 procedures, the checklist is slightly different, but that's about it. Really, the only thing that changes is down here you will close the year-end file for 2019. Make sure you've got the right payroll tax update for 2019. Do your 2020 pay run with the 2020 date. Print all your W-2, W-3s, and then after that, then you can do your 2020 tax table update. Kind of interesting. All right. Any questions on payroll? I will monitor the chat window for any questions. So frequently, we like to help out our customers close the payroll year end. So if you'd like to schedule a time to do that, you can reach out to me, Betsy, any of your other Martin & Associates contacts, and we can get something on the books to make sure we are available to help you close the payroll year end. Otherwise, if you're going to do it yourself, just make a backup first, and after you do the year-end file, go ahead and make another backup. But definitely follow those payroll steps. They lay it out pretty nicely, but if you follow the steps, you should be fine and dandy. Did I miss GL? Nope. Just making sure I didn't skip GL here. All right. Cool. Okay, so like I said, in our slide deck, we have the links to the W-4 information for GP's payroll, and we have a link to the year-end closing procedures, and I will show that link to you quickly. So that's the W-4 one. So in this wonderful knowledge base article that Microsoft puts out, so this is the routines for closing the GL, but in here it says complete the posting procedures for the other modules. And if you scroll down a little bit, it's got links to, all right, do inventory first, receivables, payables, fixed assets, analytical accounting, payroll, and lastly, close the GL year. So I will, since we're here talking about GL, I will say some good information about the GL piece. So a lot of people have the question of, okay, you know, I don't get, you know, closed or, you know, adjusting entries from my accounting firm until February or March or April sometimes. And so you may not want to close out the GL year. But if you do not close out the GL year, you know, your balance sheet balances don't roll forward. And that's really the main one. Also, when you close the year, it zeroes out your income and expenses, puts that in the retained earnings, and rolls that forward. So GP has a fun feature that you can always post to the most recently closed fiscal year. So what that means is if you wanted to, on January 2nd, if you wanted to, you could close out all the modules, assuming everything was, you know, posted in 2019. You could close out all your modules, including the GL, which would, you know, clean out your income or your income and expense accounts, put them in retained earnings, take all your balance sheet accounts, roll those balances forward. And the reason you would do that is, you know, if you went to print a financial report, all your balances would be correct at that point. You know, for January, you'd have a correct beginning balance, or at least 99% correct until you get any adjusting entries. But you'd have, you know, all those balances roll forward for financial reporting purposes. Even though 2019 is marked as closed and historical, you can still post those adjusting entries that you might get from your accounting team or accounting firm. You can take those in, let's say, March or something like that. Hopefully not that long, but let's just say, and post those back with a date of 12/31/2019, and GP will update all the 2019 information, plus it will update accordingly any beginning balance information for 2020, whether that's retained earnings or any other balance sheet type account. So we have, you know, customers that kind of do it both ways. Some close GL, you know, January 4th or something like that. They're good to go. They get entries from their accounting firm at the end of January or something, post them with a 12/31/19 date. They're all good and happy. And we have some that, keep the year open until April sometimes, and they just handle the financial reporting in a kind of interesting way just to get the prior year's ending balance kind of acting as their beginning balance. Either way is fine, but both can work, just so you know. So you can always post to the most recently closed year when you're closing out the GL. And if I'm looking at financial year-end closing for the GL, in the newer versions, they've put a nice progress bar, and they put in a button to reverse the historical year should you choose. So this is always going to show you the last time that you closed, if you closed it all. So only hit this button once. Don't ever hit it twice unless you want to have some fun, but hit it once. It's going to run through its process, and it'll update the last closing date, say 12/31/19, so that it knows that that was the last fiscal year. It marks that year as historical, and you're good to go. And again, on the newer versions, there's a magical reverse historical year, which comes in handy every now and then. But once you're on this process, this is when it rolls all the balances forward for your balance sheet accounts. All righty. Okay. I'm just watching for any questions here. I think we're mostly good. Okay, so let's see. That is basically the end of our presentation today. And I did have one question about inventory and discontinued items that I had not answered yet, and I promised I would answer that. Okay, so the question was, when you elect to remove discontinued items, what happens if there is still a quantity in stock? Will the system zero out those items? So the answer is no. If you have an item that is marked as discontinued, so if I'm looking at inventory here and looking at an item card, and I have an item that's marked as discontinued, if there is still a quantity available, it will not be removed if you select that checkbox. You would have to first, zero it out yourself through an inventory transaction, and then at that point, if the item was marked as discontinued, if there is zero quantity on hand, and if that item is not on any unposted inventory-related transactions, where that's an inventory transaction or a purchase order or a sales order or invoice type thing. So if there's those three things, discontinued, zero quantity on hand, and not on any unposted transactions, then it will remove that item. And by remove it, I mean kind of hardcore remove it. It will take it out of the item card window, and it will remove historical transaction information for that item as well. So please be careful checking that box. All righty. Are there any other questions? Because if not, we're at about at our time limit. And looks like we're good. So again, for all of you who attended, there will be an email that you'll receive with a link to the recording, which I'm sure will be even more exciting the second time around. The PowerPoint deck and the year-end closing doc that will be on our website. Both those things should be. And please share that with any coworkers, friends that run GP that have any questions. Further, please feel free to reach out to us if you have any other GP or year-end related questions. And I want to thank all of you for attending, and I hope you have a wonderful holiday season. I'm not going to save that. All right. Thank you all very much. Have a great day.